The Sword of Kaigen is a Japanese military-inspired fantasy which just feels like a gut punch the entire way through. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Chris, and today's video is the Sword of Kaigen book review. Now this is going to be a pretty quick review. There are a lot of book reviews already out there for the Sword of Kaigen. I've popped a couple of popular ones down below. People like Daniel Green, people like Murphy Napier have already reviewed this book and done a wonderful job. So I will pop them below if you want to check those out as well, but I'll give you my 2 cents. Like I said before, this book feels like a gut punch the entire way through, and I mean that in the best possible way. I was so blown away by how good this book was, and admittedly I waited until the hype had died down for the Sword of Kaigen because I was so worried that the hype train was so big that when I read it I'd be like, alright, cool. However, there's an ice dragon and that's cool, so jumping in. This book is set in the world of Kaigen, and we are following the Matsuda family as they discover the world around them is not all that it seems. Very early on in the book, the reader discovers that people who live on the Kaigenese peninsula, called the Sword of Kaigen, are powerful Theonites. These are Jia-wielding warriors who have been fed a lot of propaganda and have been at the, butt of censorship, being told and fed all this information that they are the point, they are the warriors, they need to protect the rest of the country. And because they have been fed that information, it's also a very patriarchal society. The men of Kaigen feel like it's the only reason that they live is to protect the rest of the country should something happen, and this is the information that has been given to them through all of their media channels. So this book deals a lot with censorship, it deals a lot with propaganda, which is fascinating because it is something that is not very talked about, even though it is still happening to this day. I digress. I will leave the Asian political study part of me out of this. But they've basically come to believe that they and they alone are what is standing between the world and destruction. So these patriarchal leaders believe all the stuff that the government has been telling them. The emperor has been feeding them these lies for their whole lives, so why wouldn't they believe them? And it's not until a new family arrives on the peninsula and a young boy starts talking about, the world really isn't like this, and you've been fed some stuff that isn't quite true, that people start to question anything. The book mainly follows 2 people. We have 2 of the members of the Matsuda family, Masaki, who is the mother, and under the patriarchal rule, she really hasn't been allowed to show her true colors, having been trained as a warrior herself previously, and now she feels small and like it is her only job to be a good wife and a good mother to her sons, but she does long for that life of adventure and has a little bit of that bloodlust still running through her veins. She used to live a life of fighting crime and dealing justice to bad guys on the other side of the world, and then gave that up to become Matsuda Takeru's wife and bear his children. Eventually she realized that she's living a lie and she does miss this life, and maybe her skills with a sword shouldn't be kept under the kitchen floor. The other perspective that we follow for a lot of this book is Mamoru. He is the son of Misaki and Takeru and is currently learning the art of the Whispering Blade. Mamoru is quite skilled, he is also quite patient and just a darling little character in this book, as strong-willed as he is, and he tries to fight against all this information that he's getting from another young boy until he realizes that maybe there is something more to it. Mamoru then goes to Misaki to talk about her own past, and as they start to opening up, it becomes very apparent there is a threat on their shores, and the Sword of Kaigen is going to need to leap into action. The Sword of Kaigen is a complete package of a novel. What this does in 650 odd pages as a standalone, I have never seen done before, and I hope there are more books like this out there that I just haven't discovered yet. But it was so complete. The world was immersive. Even though it wasn't huge, we only really focus on the peninsula itself, but we do throughout the book get sort of flashbacks to other parts of the world, and we understand the part that we're in has been so sheltered by anything else, and the world is actually much larger than it seems, even though we only focus on that one little part. The characters are compelling. Now I say that as someone who is not a character-driven reader. Really, they're not something that draws me to the story. Like, it's great if they are compelling, but normally I would prefer a world that's been built up and a decent plot. But the characters here got me. I had a tear in my eye. One tear. I don't show emotions. That's big in one of the scenes in this book. So that was amazing. There is a very slow build-up of plot which is intertwined with a rich and painful history, and it creates this well-rounded standalone fantasy. There's nothing else like it. I listened to the audio of this book and it went so fast for me. For 650 pages, this book flew by, and the amount of emotion that I had while listening to this book was something that I do not experience. I was angry, I was mournful, I couldn't help but laugh at some of the things the little kids did because they were depicted so well, just the way that toddlers were portrayed and did toddler things. It was so well done that, I've seen my nieces and nephew do stuff like that and they just don't comprehend things and they say things that are just funny and out of context. So they were portrayed so perfectly, which really had a depth to this book. I've never felt this emotionally invested in a story ever, and I would love to say that I'll do it again, but since reading The Sword of Kaigen, I have not felt that emotionally invested again in a book. So, challenge me in my emotions. Just jumping back to the world and expanding a little bit on that. Although we're situated on the Kaigenese Peninsula, this world is sort of blown open by the fact that we do get flashbacks and we do get this rich history intertwined within the story, which is sort of discovered through our characters' past. To make the world feel more lush and more real, the Sword of Kaigen is beautifully described as this cold, mountainous, oceanic region which is full of wind and ice and water, and it was described so beautifully within these pages that it was really easy to imagine yourself in that world. And particularly if you have visited parts of Asia, you can see yourself standing and looking at some of these beautiful cold mountain regions. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is the magic system. Now, this is basically a praise that has come from nearly every review that I've ever seen of this book, and it is reminiscent of Avatar: The Last Airbender in that it's sort of tied to the elements. The Matsuda family works in Jia, which is directly related to ice. What I really liked about the book and the magic system is that the author was not scared to show it in use. The use of Jia in this book was quite extensive, and not just in terms of the battle scenes that we got in this book, but also just the everyday use of magic and what it could do in the small instances, in just the smallest of circumstances, which really brought life to this magic system. Now, not only was the reader treated to Jia and its uses, we did also see a number of different powers from other sort of Jia users, although it wasn't called Jia, but there were other magics that could be used throughout the entirety of the book. We did see a little bit of that, but it did mainly focus on the Jia and ice manipulation with the Matsuda family. Now, the character arcs that we were explored in this book were nothing short of masterful. I felt completely differently from them at the beginning. I had very strong opinions of one character in particular at the beginning of the book, which had completely changed by the end of the book. And to do that, I've never had that happen before, where I felt one way and then just completely switched sides towards the end of the book. And I thought that was really cool for me to experience on that emotional level, to be like, I don't like you, and then I was like, alright. The other thing I want to say about characters, and this is a big criticism I have of characters sometimes, is that, and this is not a criticism, is that each character, whether they were large or small within, terms of the story, they all played a part, and that part meant something. They weren't there for the sake of being there. It wasn't just there to fill a hole or to move the story along. Each person that I could pick out names now and tell you, oh yeah, that person only had 20 pages in this 600-page book, but damn, they meant something to the story. And I thought that is amazing. I always find that amazing when an author has the ability to do that, because sometimes you do need to move that story along, but if you can make that character count and mean something other than just that part they're in, that's a pretty cool skill to have as an author. I will say that I found the story itself to be a slow burn. I really like a slow paced book myself. I think it lends itself to build up things like the worlds and the characters and the plot super well, rather than a fast paced book where you get just action scene after action scene after action scene. You don't tend to get a whole lot of the side effects of those scenes if you're just having a really fast paced book. This one really took the time to step back and explore what the consequences of those action scenes were, which I thought was very, very well done. The Sword of Kaigen really did so well in layering together tension and drama and suspense as this story built up towards the ending. And for a standalone, this had a very satisfying ending. It feels like a complete picture that we got as a reader, which was wonderful. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. I think I pretty much mirrored what everybody else said on the Sword of Kaigen. Absolutely excellent. If you have not read it and you like Asian-inspired fantasy, then I implore you to go and pick this one up. I've waited for you. The time is now. Go and pick up the Sword of Kaigen. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, then click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.